Good evening and welcome. You're watching NDTV 24/7. I'm Padmaja Joshi and this special broadcast all day today because Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping are meeting in China. That meeting is taking place on the sidelines of the SCO summit. But guess who has been watching all of this very, very closely? That person is American President Donald Trump, and for good reason. After all, this meeting comes at a time when Trump is increasingly trying to corner, in fact, bully India into stopping oil imports from Russia using the tariff bomb. A 50% tariff has already been slapped on India. The India-US trade deal has been put on pause, and the language of some within the Trump administration, including the US president himself, has turned increasingly intemperate and hostile against India. But in the midst of all this, the Prime Minister and India as a whole have gone on with business. Indian interests will be kept foremost and above everything else. That's the message that the Prime Minister gave on Independence Day from the Red Fort itself. And that's exactly what's happening. A crucial set of meetings have taken place today and are going to continue tomorrow as well. Today, Prime Minister Modi held a crucial meeting not just with Xi Jinping, but also he has met Vladimir Putin at the reception informally. Tomorrow, a bilateral is going to take place between the two in the northern Chinese city of Tianjin. Today, when the two held a bilateral, which is Xi Jinping and Narendra Modi, some words pretty much summed up the defining message of the interaction between the two countries. Mutual trust, respect, sensitivity. And what Xi Jinping said, he said it is important to have the dragon and elephant come together, two countries who are partners enabling each other's success. Listen in.
स्वागत के लिए मैं आपका हृदय से आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। पिछले वर्ष कल्याण में हमारी बहुत ही सार्थक चर्चा हुई थी। हमारे संबंधों को एक सकारात्मक दिशा मिली। सीमा पर डिसएग्रीमेंट के बाद शांति और स्थिरता का माहौल बना हुआ है।
Mr. Prime Minister, it's a great pleasure for me to meet you again this time in Tianjin. Welcome to come to China for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Tianjin Summit. Last year, you and I had a successful meeting in Japan, and the China-India relationship was reset and started anew. The two sides have illicitly implemented the important consensus we have agreed, and the bilateral exchanges and cooperation have since made new progress.
All right, so these, of course, are pictures of the handshake, the latest handshake to have taken place. A lot will be said, a lot of interpretation, a lot of dissecting of the body language will take place. Of course, people are going to do comparisons between the meeting that was held between the two heads of state in Tamil Nadu earlier and on the banks of the Sabarmati. But first, let's tell you what are the main takeaways, the 10 main points we should focus on in this bilateral between Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping. It is important because this is the first time in 7 years that the Prime Minister of India is visiting China. It's been 5 years since the Galwan clash. Since then, not only disengagement but also de-escalation has taken place. So a considerable thaw in ties. In fact, now it's gone a step beyond thaw. Many would even wonder if there is a gradual, maybe not dramatic, but a gradual warmth creeping in as well. Strategic autonomy is affirmed. Remember that story about how multiple efforts were made by Donald Trump to try and reach out to India. He has repeatedly tried to bully us. The Prime Minister didn't take his call. And similarly, almost immune to all of those threats, we have carried on with business that India needs to do at this point. Engagement with various other countries which are important in the subcontinent and outside. So that strategic autonomy has been reaffirmed. Economic cooperation as the tariffs begin to bite. Yes, let's not overemphasize also or rather underemphasize the kind of effect that these tariffs imposed by America are going to have. Will engaging with Russia and China completely do away with the impact that the US tariffs are having, the kind of impact that they are having? Perhaps not, but it's a beginning in that direction. Then, of course, what is important is that world economy needs to be stabilized, predictable economic and trade cooperation needs to take place. So a number of these things were reiterated. Let's quickly go through all of these points, the 10 main points. Here's what Xi Jinping said today. He said that the ties between the dragon and the elephant are vital. These two countries must come together in order to benefit each other. Prime Minister Modi also reiterated that the issue of border tensions was addressed. It was agreed upon that peace on the border needs to not just be established, but also maintained. Resumption of direct flights has already been announced. The Kailash Mansarovar Yatra has also resumed after a pause of 5 years. Point number 8, in addition to all of these measures, the way must be paved for welfare of humanity. Remember, these are two of the most populous countries in the world. It is important that there should be peace and stability in these two countries, not just in the interest of the subcontinent, but also the world. And the final 2 points that one must remember from Tianjin: the Kazan meet marked the reset, and now this meeting is taking it a step further. Earlier, the two heads of state met in Kazan, and now they are meeting in Tianjin. And finally, Prime Minister Modi has invited Xi Jinping to India next year, that is in 2026. Ashok Kantha, former ambassador of India to China, is joining us live. Sir, thanks very much. Understandably, there is a fair bit of euphoria in India. You know, a lot of headlines are saying that there's going to be a grand reset and Trump is going to be checkmated. Realistically, though, how much of this is going to affect Trump? What will the US president be thinking right now as we speak, looking at these pictures?
I don't think it will have any big impact on thinking of US president. It's an important meeting, no doubt about it. We have taken forward the process of calibrated improvement of relations that commenced when Prime Minister met with President Xi in Kazan in October last year. There are further steps. There is signaling by both sides that we would like to accelerate that process. But there is still a number of problems that need to be addressed. For one thing, we have talked about India and China being developmental partners and not rivals. But if you look at the pattern of Chinese behavior in even recent months, in fact, what they did during Operation Sindoor, kind of operational support they provided to Pakistan, or the fact that they sought to leverage dependencies on imports from China in critical areas like fertilizers or rare earth magnets or tunnel boring machines, or fact that they are taking up this mega hydropower project, which is going to be 3 times the size of Three Gorges project, which is largest in the world at present, and a whole lot of other issues. So point is that we need to move towards better relations with China, no doubt about it. But talking about a reset in ties or any euphoria is not warranted, given facts of the relationship, objective realities of this relationship, which are something we cannot
Ambassador
possibly
Kantha,
ignore.
we're just showing the picture of the 2 handshakes that took place today. When you talk about a gradual bettering of ties, just purely from the body language, from the kind of interaction that we've seen between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping today, you would agree that at least incremental steps are taking place in that direction? It may not be like the next big bhaichara, but things have improved.
No, absolutely. In fact, and that is desirable also. We must have incremental, improvement in relations. And that should be driven by the need for 2.8 billion people working together. We are largest, two of the most populous countries in the world. So there are pressing imperatives why we must work together. But this process need not be driven by anxieties relating to USA, because if, for instance, if we denied access to US market because there is 50% tariff on imports from India, Chinese market is not going to provide a substitute for that. Our total exports to China last year were $18 billion. And in fact, exports are coming down over last 3-4 years. So we have to be realistic about it. Likewise, trying to develop a sort of common front, working with, say, China, or some people are talking about Russia, India, China construct. I don't think that's going to help, because notwithstanding very serious problems we have with USA at this point of time, that remains a very important relationship for us, and we need to work to resolve those issues. And moving in a certain direction to compensate for deficit on US account, I don't think that's really a realistic option available to us.
Yes, and while there is optimism, one cannot have it with a fair bit of caution as well, which is why we are very realistic in the way we are evaluating these meetings that are taking place. But at the very least, Ambassador Kantha, you would agree that both sides are at least now going to use each other as a leverage against America. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yes, I mean, one can see that if you see certain signals coming from China, like when Foreign Minister Wang Yi was in India, readouts from their side talked about India joining China to oppose unilateral bullying, which was a reference to USA. We have been less inclined to use that kind of rhetoric because that is not very helpful. But we are clearly interested in accelerating process of improvement to relations. And one signal which one saw is that the Prime Minister had a separate meeting with Mr. Tsai Chi. Now, he is a de facto chief of staff to President Xi. He is number 5 in the hierarchy of Communist Party of China. He is director of General Office of Central Committee of Communist Party of China, a very key person in party setup. But it's very unusual that Prime Minister had a meeting with him, separate meeting with him. That shows that both sides are clearly looking at faster movement on the problem.
In fact, that's the meeting. That's the meeting I was about to come to, because that just seemed really unusual for him to go and have a separate meeting with a political figure in the CCPA is a definite message. But I want to draw your attention, Ambassador, and my final question to you. We had Xi Jinping saying that the dragon and the elephant must come together. It's a great idea that they should be friends and they should advance each other's interests. But how much can the elephant trust the dragon when, one, you mentioned Operation Sindoor, they were giving Pakistan intelligence. 2, in May this year, China blocked India's request for UN sanctions on 5 Pakistan-based terrorists. And in addition to that, nobody has forgotten what they did to Rajnath Singh when Rajnath Singh, the defense minister, refused to sign on that draft agreement because Pahalgam wasn't even mentioned.
I must confess that I'm very uncomfortable with this language of elephant and dragon coming together to tango. Because that also reminds, first it's very unseemly, the whole visual of elephant and dragon, tango between them. More importantly, it reminds us of certain Hindi chini bye bye, kind of narrative which hasn't served us well. So let's be realistic about it. let's be very objective in our assessment of facts. Let's seek, improved relations with China, but do so with the eyes wide open, not disregarding, issues you are referring to. So if we do that, there will be calibrated, gradual, step-by-step improvement of relations. A sort of overnight improvement, peace and harmony breaking out between India and China, that's very unlikely. And I don't think we should pursue that objective either.
All right, Ambassador Kantha, thank you very much for speaking to us here on NDTV 24/7. Of course, the reception at the SCO is also taking place now. We'll get across to our colleagues on the ground in just a second. But Sana Hashmi, fellow at the Taiwan Asia Exchange Foundation, joins us along with Jan Oberg, director of the Independent Transnational Foundation for Peace and Future Research. Sana, I want to ask you first. Just like Ambassador Kantha said, is this language also seeming a little over the top? I mean, any friendly overtures are welcome, no doubt. But the fact that the Indian ambassador, the Chinese ambassador to India has spoken about, a growing friendship. You've had, of course, what Mr. Jinping himself said, Mr. Xi himself said. What does one make of this? Is this a bit of a overreaction, an overstatement? How does one read this?
I think I would just call it an excitement from the Chinese side, and I would say that it's just a projection of or giving an illusion that the relations are back to normal, which it's not. And even if you look at the statement that are coming out from China, and of course, there is no joint statement. That was not a bilateral visit, so of course there was no joint statement. But then there has always been a discrepancy in these statements from Indian side as well as Chinese side, and the Chinese side doesn't really take all the concerns of India into consideration. So I feel that there is a lot of gap between what has been said and what has been done. And this is that we have been seeing for a long time. And even now, even though I believe the visit was significant and the visuals that are coming out, it does tell us that the relationship are moving towards gradual improvement. But still, I feel that Chinese behavior, Chinese actions, they haven't really changed much with respect to India.
So what is the best case scenario for us?
I think we are doing our best, and the best case scenario is that we have to normalize relationship at the highest level. But this is not driven by, and I think this has been said multiple times, that this is not driven by Donald Trump tariff war on India. This was happening for a long time, and the dialogue was never suspended, even after the Galwan clashes. But of course, were not meeting. India was very clear that we are not going to meet at the highest level. So we only started doing it since last year, since Kazan, and this is the second such meeting between the Indian and the Chinese leadership. So I feel like we are doing whatever we could in the given situation that we have been put into, and we are trying to. And then I think our strategic autonomy is being put in its place where it should be, and I think it has now taken the front seat, and I think we are doing what we could do.
Jan Oberg, I want to quote what the Chinese ambassador to India said a while ago. He said, the Chinese president told Indian Prime Minister that China and India are cooperation partners, not rivals, and that the two countries are each other's development opportunities rather than threats. He's saying we are not rivals. He says we are not threats to each other. This even as they continue to try and build border villages. How do you see this?
Well, if I may put up a more world order perspective than a bilateral perspective, I think it's good for the world. There's no doubt that there's much more to win for the whole world, not only for the two giants, but from cooperation, from not being rivals, than there is from being rivals. That could actually be very destructive. I think it's also true that this is a part of the restructuring, if you will, of the emerging multicultural, multi-regional, multi-nodal, I don't call it multipolar because I don't think we should have poles in the future, but a networking world in which we come together and cooperate where we can and take it easy where we cannot cooperate, instead of having this, one world, one polar world which tries to dominate. So I see this development as potentially very important and very useful for the whole world. I would like to keep a little bit, if I may, a moment to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, because I have two problems with it, if you will. Not that I don't think it's important they're doing what they're doing in their meeting, but we should also, as intellectuals and commentators, think a little bit of where could this get better. First of all, I think it has a far too traditional security conceptualization. We need human security, we need common security, we need conflict resolution, we need nonviolence, we need a new way of thinking how to make the world a more secure place. We need to stop having UN members who collectively spend exactly 100 times more on the military than on the UN's every activity. Secondly, I think it's wonderful to see these high-level guys that you're showing them now on the screen. Of course, that's where you begin. But I'm also saying it is time we globalize democracy. I mean, here you have two state leaders who are representing 3 billion people. Where are the people in these processes? At some point, the peoples and everything people can contribute, NGOs and civil society organizations and everybody else can contribute, would be a good thing for the world too. We have national democracies, we don't have global democracies, but we have a global economy, we have a global military. So we need to rethink what democracy is for global decision making.
And a lot of this rethinking is happening thanks to Donald Trump. Many people are actually today saying that Donald Trump had a large part to play in ensuring that this shakeup takes place. Mr. Oberg.
Well, I think we would be grateful for the Trump regime and the personality of Trump, because he's doing his utmost to both destroy the U.S. empire and opening up for new coalitions. He's not aware he's doing that, but I consider the United States empire, not the United States, but the empire on its way down. And we're in an incredible change situation globally in which we're all grappling and should be grappling with world perspectives and not just national or regional or bilateral aspects of the developments. I, as a Westerner, I'm not applauding that the West has become so self-destructive and militaristic as it has, but that is a fact. And now we have got to concentrate on the 88% of humanity who do not belong to the Western world. That's where I see hope.
Sana Hashmi, what do you make of the New York Times report today, which said that it was Prime Minister Modi's refusal to agree to get the Nobel Prize or recommend Donald Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize that eventually set things on the downward spiral where we find ourselves today, that the Chinese president is saying that we are the best of friends, we are looking out for each other's interests, we are not rivals. One can't really make out what it is with the US president. Was it his peeve because of not being recommended for the Nobel Peace Prize? Is he angry with the continuing war in Ukraine? Is he upset with what he's now dubbed Modi's war? What is his problem?
I think a lot of people are confused what's actually happening in the US. And it's just been 8 months that he has been in power, but it feels like he has been there for years. So much has happened in the past 8 months. But I think that it's hardly about economy. It's hardly about trade. It's more about how India didn't really respond favorably to Trump's Nobel Prize aspirations. And also how India did not acknowledge, which I don't think that US did really play a huge role in the India-Pakistan conflict. So I do believe that it has more to do with Donald Trump's ego than actually real issues. And I don't think that there is anything real with respect to US shifting policies. How could a country like US treat such an important strategic partner in such a way? And how could a country like the US is actually hosting Pakistani military leadership in White House? As in, a lot of people are confused about it. A lot of people are trying to make sense. But then I think this is much more detrimental to the United States than any other country. So I feel that it's about everything and anything but trade.
Let me actually read out an excerpt of that New York Times report. It says that Prime Minister Narendra Modi was given a call by Donald Trump on the 17th of June. Now, at that time, Prime Minister Modi refused to engage with Donald Trump's pursuit of the Nobel Peace Prize, and that played a key role in souring the relationship between the two nations. Apparently, Mr. Trump in that call said that I am very proud of how I ended the military escalation. Pakistan is going to nominate me for the Nobel Peace Prize, an honor for which I have been, in fact, that's an honor that he has been openly campaigning for. Prime Minister Modi at that point told Trump that the US's involvement had got nothing to do with the recent ceasefire. It had been settled directly between India and Pakistan, and that is where, in a manner of speaking, things went from bad to worse. So, Mr. Oberg, we are going to expect more of this. If this is how upset he is with that June 17 phone call, there isn't going to be any kind of rapprochement between the two sides anytime soon.
You see, in my humble view, this is an example of how media can spend a lot of time on absolutely things of no relevance or importance. I have been engaged in the Nobel Peace Prize, which is one big fraud with a few exceptions. It's a constant violation of Alfred Nobel's will. And if you read it, which is 4 lines, you will see that Mr. Trump could never, ever get the Peace Prize because it's about demilitarization, abolishment of standing armies, peace congresses, etc. Now, whatever is his ego and what he wants to do, I think it's a waste of time for us to discuss when we're talking about the change of the whole world. You see what I mean? I mean, Mr. Trump is very good at getting attention, and I understand fully, if this story is true or has any relevance, that Modi did not want to recommend that when Netanyahu had nominated him. I mean, you don't want to be in that class, and you don't want to give a Nobel Peace Prize to somebody who is grossly responsible for the genocide in Gaza, for bombing in Iran, for nuclear weapons, for God knows what. I mean, this is bizarre. Sorry.
But what is the Chinese view on all of this? A lot has been said about the Modi-Xi Jinping body language. We will also tell you what Chinese journalists in China are saying about the bilateral that happened. But let's get to that body language question first. From sitting on a swing in Gujarat, sipping Nariyal Pani in Mahabalipuram, to a staid handshake today, here is how we have seen the body language between Modi and Xi change and evolve. A quick look.
A powerful handshake, silent yet thunderous on the world stage. Part of a carefully choreographed diplomatic dance, watched by keen-eyed observers across power corridors, some even in the White House. After 7 years of frosty silence, the ice has cracked. The moment India and China stepped out of the hostility, captured in a single searing image. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping locking hands in a rare and riveting display of diplomacy. Both leaders extending their hands to meet the others, a signal of willingness to work together in the face of global challenges. The body language, far from the days of swinging in front of the Sabarmati in Ahmedabad, but firm, respectful and calculated. This wasn't camaraderie, but strategic power play. PM Modi, known for his warm hugs, chose formality, and President Xi, equally guarded, matched his stance, a sign of cautious cooperation. At stakes, nothing less than regional stability and global order. The tiger and dragon, once locked in confrontation, are now choosing optics of peace over echoes of past conflict. While actions may speak louder than words, the two leaders' words were just as measured.
हमारे सहयोग से दोनों देशों के 2.8 बिलियन लोगों के हित जुड़े हुए हैं। इससे पूरी मानवता के कल्याण का मार्ग भी प्रशस्त होगा। परस्पर विश्वास, सम्मान और संवेदनशीलता के आधार पर हम अपने संबंधों को आगे बढ़ाने के लिए प्रतिबद्ध हैं।
China and India are two ancient civilizations in the East. We are the world's two most populous countries, and we are also important members of the global South. We both shoulder the historical responsibility of improving the well-being of our two peoples, promoting the solidarity and rejuvenation of developing countries, and propelling the progress of human society. It is the right choice for both sides to be friends who have good neighborly and amicable ties, partners who enable each other's success, and to have the dragon and the elephant dance together.
One handshake, 1,000 messages. In the great game of global power, Tianjin wasn't just a meeting. It was a chess move. For now, the world waits with bated breath to see what happens next.
In diplomacy, body language is almost as important as written statements. Going by the body language of the two leaders today, they exchanged a warm handshake, a firm and a warm handshake, indicating, many say, an intent to move forward, provided the contentious issues are addressed. Will that happen remains to be seen. A roadmap for that has to be identified. China needs to walk the talk as well. But one thing is for certain, from the body language, the cold shoulder that the two leaders gave each other for the time between the Galwan clash till now has now made for firm handshakes. Will there be warmer greetings soon? Only time will tell. In Tianjin, this is Gauri Dwivedi for NDTV.
But let's also get in the view from China. My colleague Aditya Raj Kaul caught up with Chinese journalist Chen Shui. Here's what he had to say about today's meeting.
We are reporting continuously from the SCO summit here in China, and the big handshake between the Chinese President Xi Jinping and, of course, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has just concluded. It was more than 50 minutes meeting and some people-to-people contact and an unprecedented way forward between India and China. Who would have thought that 5 years after Galwan, there would be a reset in ties? Thank you to Donald Trump and the White House for making this happen. But joining me right now is a journalist from China, Chen, who is in fact the founder of the China Briefing News, who will speak to us more about the reset in the ties. Thank you very much, Chen, for joining us.
Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, please tell me, how do journalists in China see the developments between India and China? You know, there is the Trump tariff. It was imposed on China, and now the Maharaja of tariffs, Bob, against India, and a lot of anti-India statements coming in from the American side. What are your views?
I think for the U.S. tariff, huge tariffs against India, I think it's beyond everyone's expectation. Previously, we always believed India is an ally of the U.S., but now you have the over 50% of the tariff, and also the U.S. has forced India to open its more market, for example, the sensitive agriculture part. So I think that is a huge shock, and some people even call it kind of a betray. And for the China-India relations, I think as both sides agree that is we are not affected by the third party, but we're also not targeting the third party. I think for Prime Minister Modi's 7 years, the first visit in 7 years to China, I think that is a milestone for the bilateral ties.
Any Bollywood films that you like and you want to speak about?
I think when I was a student, the Three Idiots, that is quite influential here in China.
Amir Khan.
And I met him in Beijing several times when his new films were released here in China, and he's very popular.
What are the songs? Are there any Bollywood songs that you like or enjoy?
I think one of the most influential ones that coming to mind is like this. I don't know how to say it in Hindi, but the rhythm is like this. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun.
Mr. Obag and Ms. Hashmi continue to be with us. I would request you to please stay for just a second. I want to cut across to Tianjin, where my colleague Gauri Dwivedi is joining us live from. By the way, anyone who actually could guess what song that journalist was humming, you can tweet to us, because none of us could figure that out. But Gauri, what's the program now? Of course, that big meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin is tomorrow. It's about 15 hours from now. But what's happening right now?
I figured that song out actually, Padmaja, but we're going to have that chat in a bit. But as far as the meeting is concerned, the Prime Minister Modi will have with President Putin tomorrow is going to be extremely significant. It comes in the backdrop of some very shrill rhetoric from the Trump administration, and also sets the backdrop and context in terms of what one can expect in terms of messaging as well as roadmap between India and Russia. As for the meeting that took place today, Padmaja, you've been covering every aspect of it as well, which is the significance of it, the timing of it, the messaging of it, and also the readouts that came in both from India as well as China. There are two things that really stood out. One is that there is an intent to move ahead. Contentious issues do remain. It's not like those have been completely brushed aside. So that remains a very core part of it. Prime Minister Modi also made a mention of the fact that mutual trust and sensitivity is extremely important. Now, when you take sensitivity, this whole business of going around naming border towns in Chinese names has a certain impact on the bilateral relationship. So that's the sensitivity aspect to it. Trust, well, there continues to be a big trust deficit. And the reason for that is the fact that border issue does remain a primary core concern. And lastly, the third country reference that was made by the Indian readout is also important because that could mean both Pakistan as well as America. Now, how is that going to pan out going forward will essentially be something that remains to be seen. But what we can say is that with the possibility of Xi Jinping coming to India for the BRICS summit, there is an intent on both sides to continue the momentum in terms of discussions and deliberations to ensure that the bilateral relationship that has come out of its deep freeze now heads towards some sort of normalization.
The Indian delegation, what's the mood that you picked up from there, Gauri? Because largely a lot of analysts who are looking at China, who of course, and we are all aware of China's past as well, because they are our host, for want of a better word, I mean, we can't use an uncharitable word, let's just say they are a little difficult to trust given the past history that we have with them. Today's bilaterals have gone off rather well. I mean, going purely by what was said from either side. What will be the best case scenario, the best situation that we would want to take away from Tianjin? Gauri.
You're right about the fact that the trust deficit remains a primary concern with regard to India, China. And it's not like it's like a small bridge. It's like a huge deficit that exists right now. And bridging that is going to take time. But as far as the MEA is concerned, as far as the Indian delegation is concerned, there are two or three very important aspects. One is we need to keep in mind that this is not a China bilateral visit of the Prime Minister. This is the SCO summit for which the Prime Minister has come to China. It just happens to be hosted by China. And a bilateral is taking on the sidelines of that. So that's a very important distinction we need to keep in mind. Second is the Indian delegation is aware of the fact that there are challenges that lie ahead, which is why the focus on people-to-people ties has probably been the best thing in terms of outcomes. Now, whether it is about faster processing of visas, whether it is about direct connectivity, whether it's about Kailash Mansarovar trip now being allowed, all those add up to the big diaspora demands, the big people-to-people connectivity demands that have been coming in from both sides. But how do you go about bridging the core issues is something that remains to be seen. Even the Indian delegation understands that, which is why there have been very tempered expectations on some of those tangible outcomes which are yet to come.
And it's going to be a tightrope walk that we have to do. Given that you also have a domestic audience already from within the opposition, there are voices that have come out saying, look, here is a China that just 5 years ago gave us Galwan. Have we forgotten that? Where is this, strong response that we have spoken of? How can you extend the hand of friendship to China again? So that balance also between a diplomatic outreach and a political messaging back home has to be struck.
Indeed, Padmaja, you've hit the nail on its head, which is that fine balancing act is going to be extremely difficult, challenging for all policymakers, and essentially something that has been reflective of the times that we live in right now. Even something as important as a bilateral relationship and the outcomes that come out of a meeting also ends up becoming deeply politicized. Having said that, with regard to Galwan, with regard to border clashes, with regard to the disengagement and leading to the larger issue of the China-Pakistan nexus, there is complete alignment within the Indian delegation, within the Indian establishment, that these are core issues that can never be brushed aside every time we talk about the India-China relationship. And no normalization, no reset, no game-changing change can ever happen till the time these core issues are addressed. So that really is the bottom line as far as the summit, the bilateral meeting between the two leaders is concerned.
And a number of meetings are taking place on the sidelines as well. That reception that took place, Aditya Raj Kaul is also joining us live now. And the Prime Minister has tweeted about it. He met with the President of Kazakhstan. He interacted with the President of Tajikistan. What are the other such informal meetings that have been held? And what really is achieved from all of this? Because for a lot of us on the outside, it is actually these informal one-on-ones where a lot of straight talk is done. Aditya.
Well, that's right, Padmaja. India enjoys great relationship diplomatically with several other countries who are part of the SCO. Let's also remember that apart from the SCO member nations, there are observers like Mongolia and Afghanistan, both of which are great partners of India. In spite of all the challenges and odds, Afghanistan and Taliban have had trust with India instead of Pakistan over the last many, many months, and that's very clear. Of course, the big talking point is the bilateral that happened with China and Xi Jinping, and that's being discussed ad nauseum. It is blown out of proportion in many ways because, as Gauri was also pointing out, it is the SCO summit and the joint declaration that are the really meat of the news or the headlines, really, not the bilateral, because bilateral is perhaps just an attempt by both the countries to reset or at least begin to reset the ties from people to people contact stage. There's a lot of area to cover, including trust deficit that has really gone down south after Operation Sindoor, where China supported Pakistan, and even before that, since the Galwan attack and the violence that was seen from the Chinese PLA. Apart from that, tomorrow is the big day, Padmaja, when Modi and Putin would be meeting. In my understanding, in this entire SCO and the meetings on the sidelines, this is the most significant meeting of all, when Modi and Putin will come on the same room. They will be discussing in detail, threadbare, not just the Ukraine crisis, but the trade also. So two things very significant. This comes in the backdrop of the Trump tariffs slapped against India, 50%. A lot of bullying from Americans. Is the first meeting between Modi and Putin ever since the tariffs were announced. And apart from that, we will also see the Ukraine crisis being discussed, where Zelensky, just about 24 hours ago, made a call to Prime Minister, who was in China, and ahead of the SCO. So that's very, very critical that at a time when Trump has failed to restore peace on the Russia-Ukraine front, it is Zelensky now looking towards Modi as a peacemaker, as someone who said that this is not an era of war, solutions cannot be found on the battlefield. And now perhaps Modi can convince Putin that it's time to end the war, it's time to think of peace.
Absolutely. Let me just, a few of the other exchanges that have taken place. The Prime Minister has put out a picture with President Muizu of Maldives, with KP Oli from Nepal, of course, with the Prime Minister of Egypt as well. These interactions on the sidelines, Ms. Hashmi, also important because we were told for a very long time that these are two of our neighbors or two of our former allies who have now been lost to India. The reference, of course, was to the Maldives and to Nepal. These interactions also important.
Change over diplomatically when it comes to Maldives. I mean, you remember that campaign that was run from Maldives, India out before the elections. And thereafter, even after elections, the top minister in the cabinet in Maldives had remarked against Prime Minister and Indians. And thereafter, we had a campaign against Maldives that resulted in an economic collapse of tourism industry in Maldives. And finally, there was a course correction that was done. Prime Minister was invited. There were, under the table apologies that were, sent out to India. And a huge red carpet was, laid down for Prime Minister Narendra Modi very, very recently, just a few weeks ago. So clearly there's been a change of heart from Maldives. Strategically, it's important for India also, and India has had very traditional and historic and important ties with Maldives. Apart from that, several other countries, you mentioned Kazakhstan and Tajikistan, who are really the center stage of the SCO also, because India is looking towards connectivity. India is looking towards free trade.
And we'll continue to talk about the importance and the significance of all of these countries, but more specifically and most importantly, continue to build up to that big meeting between Vladimir Putin and Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, in about 14 and a half hours from now. Gauri Dwivedi and Aditya Raj Kaul will continue to report from China, taking a very quick break. Back in a minute. Welcome back. We are talking about the big visit to the SCO by Prime Minister Modi. Modi and Xi shake hands today, but what is the kind of reception or what is the kind of response that Donald Trump is getting? Clearly, American media are not too happy with Donald Trump. Mostly, he is being accused of pushing India too far, so far that now it is warming up more and more to Russia and to China. Here's the kind of headlines that were seen today. India's Modi to visit China as US trade ties fray. You had another newspaper saying that actually it is America which has pushed India. Trump's India's tariffs are a strategic blunder. That's one of the opinion pieces written in the Washington Post, where they are saying that it's high time that the American president changes course now. And that is pretty much an opinion that is reflected across several media in America. You've also got another saying that what Trump is doing is going to jeopardize years of the effort that Americans have put into trying to establish a good relationship with India. While Trump rattles the world, China basks in the limelight. And what was very interesting in this particular article in the Wall Street Journal is when they said that 4 of the biggest powers in the world are currently meeting in China. So they are saying that it is Russia, China, and India, all of these countries being counted as among the world's biggest superpowers, and they're all meeting each other in China. Powerful optics, China's Xi to welcome Putin, Modi in a grand show of solidarity. So there is unanimity across the board, where American media is wondering, Sana Hashmi, what has Trump done and the kind of damage that he has done, can it be undone even if there is a change of guard?
I think I would say that we need to treat India-US relations separate from India-China relations. Of course, this has acted as a catalyst. It has accelerated India's willingness to extend an olive branch to China, maybe. But of course, as I've already mentioned, that this has been happening for a very long time. But, I think if a country that is taking advantage of Trump's tariff war and isolation of India is China. Look at how long the red carpet is that China is actually rolling out for India. So I feel more than India, it is China that is taking advantage or being a beneficiary of this situation. So I would actually look at from China's perspective and not from India's perspective. For India, even today, the US, of course, the trust is a little bit less than before. But even today, it is an important key strategic partner, the US. And I don't think it's going to change. And then, of course, it's not about choosing one country over another. That is not India's policy at all. But I would say that India's engagement with the US would continue. Of course, there's a setback. We have to see how it goes. And then we also have to see the US minus Trump. And the engagement with the US has been decades old. The work that has been put to India-US relationship, it is way beyond Trump. So I feel that India is, of course, doing a lot of crisis management, thinking of how to normalize ties with the US. But I think it is more China than India that has kind of taken advantage of this entire situation.
All right, Sana Hashmi, thanks very much. Appreciate you joining us here on NDTV 24/7.